Exodus is not just trying to be another sci-fi RPG. It is trying to build a kind of universe you can disappear into. A future shaped by dying planets, arc ships, time dilation, transhuman civilizations, and technology so advanced it may as well be magic. And that matters, because for an RPG, world building is not just background decoration, it is the thing that gives the journey weight. Mass Effect understood that. The best RPGs usually do, and from everything Archetype has shown us so far, Exodus seems to understand it too. Mass Effect is one of the best examples of what a strong world building can do for an RPG. It is not just a story with planets in the background. It feels like an actual galaxy full of history, politics, cultures, danger, charm, and small details that makes the world feel lived in. You can spend hours just exploring, reading codex entries, trying different builds, talking to the crew, or walking around the Normandy like it is a real place you have returned to after a long mission. Very few games have given me that same feeling of total immersion, that sense that you are not just playing through a story, but living inside a world for a while. And from what Archetype has shown so far, Exodus seems to be aiming for that same kind of pull, the kind that makes you say just a little bit more. And then suddenly you realize it's 2:30 in the morning and you have to get up early the next day. That is not just good content, that is world building doing its job. And Archetype is not only building this foundation inside the game itself. Much like Mass Effect, Exodus is expanding its universe to other media as well. Mass Effect had novels, comics, smaller games, and even an animated film, all adding pieces to the larger galaxy around the game. Exodus seems to be taking a similar approach, with books, lore material, and tabletop RPG content helping to build the world before the game even arrives. This matters, because when a universe is built beyond the main game, it can start to feel less like a single product and more like a place with history. A useful way to understand world building is to break it into a few major pillars: geography and environment, history, culture, technology, and the things that feels almost like magic. These are the pieces that make a fictional world feel like it existed before the player arrived, and Exodus already has a lot of them working beneath the surface. First is geography and environment. Exodus begins with a dying Earth. After centuries of human misuse, governments and powerful organizations begin launching fleets of arc ships into the galaxy, carrying colonists in search of a new home. These ships travel close to the speed of light, crossing impossible distances over the span of generations, and eventually humanity reaches the Omega Centauri cluster, a strange and alien region of space filled with habitable worlds, ancient powers, and civilizations far beyond anything the people of Earth were prepared to find. This is where the story of June and his crew begins. Not in a familiar galaxy where humanity already understands the rules, but in a place where they are late arrivals, surrounded by forces much older, stranger, and more powerful than themselves. And that brings us to history. Exodus takes place around 40,000 years in the future, and by the time the arc ships from Earth arrive in the Centauri cluster, they are not entering an empty frontier. They are entering a world that already has its own powers, borders, wars, extinct species, political struggles, and ancient grudges. In that sense, humanity is almost a newcomer again. Much like Mass Effect, there is something compelling about entering a larger world where humans are not automatically at the center. except in Exodus, that idea is pushed even further, because the dominant powers in the clusters are not traditional aliens, they are the Celestials. Because of time dilation, tens of thousands of years separate the humans arriving from Earth from the original human settlers who reached the clusters long before them. And over those millennia, those settlers changed through evolution, genetic engineering, survival, and deliberate civilization building. They became something else, a vast range of transhuman societies, collectively known as the Celestials. That is where Exodus culture becomes especially interesting. The Celestials are not just one people with one identity. They are a collection of strange, powerful, and deeply different civilizations, shaped by necessity, biology, technology, and the environments they had to survive in. Some of them feels almost mythic, some feel political, some feel horrifying. The Crown Celestials, for example, are a matriarchal warrior society, while the Marayama feels like something pulled out of a Lovecraftian nightmare, secretive, nomadic, and deeply unsettling. And that is what makes Exodus worldbuilding so compelling to me. Humanity is not simply discovering aliens. Humanity is meeting versions of itself that time has turned into something alien. Then there is technology, or in Exodus' case, technology that can almost feel like magic. Arthur C. Clarke famously said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that idea fits Exodus extremely well. To a regular human arriving from Earth, celestial technology is so far beyond familiar understanding that it may as well be supernatural. But that does not mean Exodus is pure fantasy wearing a sci-fi coat. There is a useful idea in storytelling called hard and soft magic, popularized by Brandon Sanderson. Hard magic has clear rules. The audience understands what it can do, what it cannot do, and what the limits are. Soft magic is more mysterious. The audience may not fully understand its limits, and it often exists more as a source of wonder, fear, or myth. Science fiction can work in a similar way. The Expanse is a good example of harder sci-fi, where the world feels grounded in physics, consequences, and rules. Star Wars leans much softer, where the technology and the force often feel more mythic than technical. Exodus seems to be aiming somewhere between those two poles. It has hard sci-fi foundation, arc ships, time dilation, genetic engineering, survival, evolution, and the consequences of traveling across impossible distances. But celestial technology is advanced enough that from a human perspective, it can still feel strange, mythic, and almost magical. And that balance is important, because Exodus does not seem to be using advanced technology only as a tool. It is using it as a part of the mystery, part of the danger, and part of the question at the center of the setting. What does humanity become when technology advances so far that even other humans can no longer understand it? And this is why Exodus is so interesting to me. Archetype has not been treating this world like a thin backdrop for quests and combat. They have been laying a massive foundation through lore, books, tabletop material, faction design, history, technology, and culture. And the people involved matter here. Peter F. Hamilton is known for massive space opera worlds like Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained, and his work on Exodus, the Archimedes engine, helps build the universe beyond the game itself. James Oland, whose career is tied to some of the most important RPGs ever made, including Baldur's Gate, Knights of the Old Republic, Neverwinter Nights, Dragon Age Origins, and Star Wars The Old Republic. Drew Karpyshyn, whose work includes Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, Mass Effect 2, and the Darth Bane novels. That kind of background does not guarantee that Exodus will succeed. A strong foundation still needs execution. The game has to make this world playable, memorable, and emotionally alive. But it does explain why the world building feels so deliberate. If Archetype can stay true to that vision and actually stick the landing, Exodus could become one of the rare sci-fi RPG universes people do not just play through, but remember. Not because it copied Mass Effect, Halo, Knights of the Old Republic, or Half-Life, but because it built a world strong enough to stand among them.